Hey y'all, last time I told you about the factories where critical theory is manufactured. And you may know critical theory under another term, sort of an umbrella term, as wokeness. Critical race theory, critical gender theory, critical queer theory, critical everything theory. The factories that create wokeness and all these theories are our teacher colleges and our public schools. And critical theory gets to your kids through teachers, and teachers get it from teacher colleges. That's where they learn to use critical pedagogy in the classroom. Critical pedagogy is the teaching method they learn wherein teachers and kids are equals. Teachers let kids decide what they want to learn, where the whole objective is for kids to achieve so called critical consciousness and learn to become activists to tear down everything in the existing society. The actual curriculum is secondary to critical pedagogues. We also talked about critical literacy. That's where they teach your little kids to read text that will incite them to social action to change society. Now, last time I promised you a list of buzzwords to help you spot the critical pedagogy creeps, but then I decided we would let the critical theory pushers provide you with the list themselves, since their faculty bios are just chock full of interesting vocabulary. I chose a few from the teacher colleges at UT Austin, UNT, and U of H, but this is the predominant ideology in teacher colleges throughout Texas and throughout the country. So you can find it pretty much anywhere. So without further ado, let's start with the horns. Melissa Wetzel. Her scholarship focuses on the preparation of teachers in literacy for equity-focused practices and the development of justice-focused coaching and mentoring in pre-service and in-service settings. She draws from critical race scholarship and culturally sustaining pedagogy frameworks to prepare teachers, blah, 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 blah. She is also interested in critical literacy learning throughout the lifespan, particularly how teachers and students together design literacy practices that are transformative. She draws on qualitative methods in her work, primarily critical discourse analysis and ethnography. What caught your ear there? Was it equity focused? Maybe justice focused? Critical race scholarship? If you picked up on any of those, good job. You should also pay attention to the phrase culturally sustaining pedagogy. That means finding out what in a child's background will push his or her emotional buttons and then tailoring lessons to what will trigger them to activism. And of course, she just mentions critical literacy outright. Next up from UT Austin, Jennifer Adair. She works with young children, teachers, parents, and administrators to understand how racism and white supremacy impact the learning experiences of young children. She focuses on the importance of agency for children's capability expansion and ways to measure and locate agency, on and on and on. Look past the white supremacy, racism verbiage for just a second. I want you to focus on the word agency. Critical pedagogy is obsessed with agency, or the idea that young children should be free to make their own choices about big things. Not only that, but that they're capable of making their own choices about big things, like what they'll learn and how they'll feel about current events, or even deciding what gender they'd like to be today. And yes, this is where that comes from. But Michelle, you're saying, aren't kids by definition sort of naive and, well, innocent? And I would say, yes, they are. But critical social justice teachers believe, and I'm not joking, that innocence is just a social construct. And a racist, classist one at that, because not all kids get to experience the privilege of innocence. See, privileged kids have a box built around them that masquerades as what we call innocence, and certain other kids don't have that protection. Therefore, all kids need to be pushed into the stressful world of activism to bring about change so that all kids can experience this construction we call innocence. So yeah, people in teacher colleges believe childhood innocence is a racist myth, and I swear to God, you can't make this stuff up. Next from UT Austin, Alex's research examines the Freirean tradition of critical pedagogical thought through psychoanalytic, decolonial, feminist, and post-cultural lenses. Okay, that's a whole bunch of words to say he studies critical pedagogy and its founder. That's really it. That's what all those words meant. She explores the intersection of the socio-political and mathematical lives of children with a focus on identity and learning. I bet you didn't know that kids had mathematical lives, did you? Now you do. The keyword in her bio is identity. Teachers and professors talking about identity ad nauseum are like 99.9% of the time of the critical pedagogy school. Keep your eye out for identity. Next is Kefferlin Brown. Her research and teaching focus on the socio-cultural knowledge of race in teaching and curriculum, critical multicultural teacher education, and the educational discourses and intellectual thought related to African Americans and their educational experiences in the U.S. So, focus on race and teaching is just another way of saying focus on identity. And all that whole paragraph was just about culturally responsive teaching. Next, Grace Kim. Her research focuses on adolescent literacy, new media, and multicultural education within a global context with particular interest in the intersections of language, identity, and power. So from that, you take intersectionality, identity, and power. That's Critical Pedagogy 101. Kemper Lipscomb is making sense of complex phenomena by drawing on students' diverse funds of knowledge. This allows students to better understand the world in which we live so they may become agents of change within it. So let's break this into the two parts that matter. The phrase diverse funds of knowledge is the belief in critical pedagogy that teachers and students' knowledge is equal, that what they bring to the classroom is of equal value. And then she flat out uses the agents of change phrase. And of course, an agent of change is just a little critical theorist or a little revolutionary. Next, his research focuses on critical and emancipatory approaches to pedagogy, curriculum, and cultural studies. He's particularly interested in problems posed for educators by globalization, the intersecting effects of race, class, and capital in schools and society, developing the theoretical resources for social movements, and extending and rethinking the traditions of critical pedagogy and philosophy. So there's a lot in there, but the emancipation language, that's the idea that education should emancipate you from the status quo, from the existing society. That's what critical pedagogues are all about. And then the developing theoretical resources for social movements, that's a really long way of saying turning your kids into little critical theorists, little revolutionaries. Next, his interests revolve around how we construct our identities, particularly through the ways we argue who we are to other social actors. Identity, identity, identity. Katharina Payne researches civic education, early childhood and elementary education, and teacher education to examine the role of relationships, community, and justice to make classrooms democratic and equitable spaces. So-called democratic classrooms, where kids decide what they want to learn and where kids are equals of their teachers, those are hallmarks of critical pedagogy. Cynthia Salinas. Her work examines social studies teachers' enactment and countering of curriculum through narratives that include civic identities, agency, and membership of others. So what you need to focus on here is countering the curriculum or counter narratives. And of course, identity and agency, agency and identity all over again. Do you see a pattern here? Luis Urrieta, he is specifically interested in Chicanx, Latinx, and indigenous cultures and identities, activism as a social practice in educational spaces. So obviously more identity. And then the activism as a social practice. That's interesting because in a critical classroom, students are propelled to activism in groups because a student alone might burn out on whatever their chosen issue is. They may get distracted by, childhood. They may want to play outside or play video games instead. But in a group, there are other kids holding them accountable. There's competition, there's encouragement, there's contagious thought, contagious anger, contagious enthusiasm, and that group can keep the activism ball rolling. Okay, so now we're going to move over to downtown H-Town for a sample of University of Houston's College of Education. First up, Dr. Samuel Brower. Dr. Brower's work is situated at the intersection of critical pedagogy social studies education, and teaching for justice. In particular, he focuses on how social studies teachers can utilize transformative pedagogical practices to support student empowerment and counter the traditional hegemonic narratives found in social studies standards and textbooks. Translation: Dr. Brower is a critical social justice professor. He teaches future teachers critical pedagogy so they can teach kids to challenge what they learn in social studies class. And that phrase about support student empowerment just means teach kids to criticize society and protest, in plain English. Jennifer Chavot. Her research and teaching focuses on mathematics teacher learning about equity and social justice in mathematics education. From her bio, again, quote, I also study my own learning about equity and social justice in mathematics education. Now, set aside the fact that she just said she studies her own learning. That's part of these reflective exercises that critical pedagogues engage in to make sure they're being the best critical pedagogues they can possibly be. And the rest is easy. She just tells us she's interested in social justice in math. His research interests include social reconstructionist art education, multiculturalism, Asian aesthetics, gender, and sexuality. Oh, what a bio. So social reconstructionist art is academic longhand for social justice art. Art that aims to transform society or incite people to social justice. Multicultural art education kind of means the same thing, just social justice art education. So now we've seen social justice literacy, social justice math, and we can add social justice art. Can't have a teacher in any subject leave teacher college without a heaping helping of critical pedagogy. Laveria Hutchison. From her bio, my scholarship discusses literacy strategies that support all learners in acquiring the capacity to critically understand text sources and to design written responses to indicate learning. So, capacity to critically understand text sources is just critical literacy. And last, but by God not least, go Big Green. Let's see the critical pedagogues at University of North Texas. And we simply must start with the Dean of the College of Education himself, Randy Bomer. He's the author of a book about critical literacy. But let's see how he describes himself. Dr. Bomer's research is about the strengths, resources, and knowledge that students bring with them to school, literacy curricula that build upon those strengths, and policies and perspectives that do or do not support teachers' recognition of students' existing understandings and capabilities. Okay, folks, that is one really long sentence to say that he researches the role of student identity in literacy education. I swear to God, academics get paid by the word. Amy Anderson. Her current work focuses on cultural humility and social justice supports for adults who work with youth in mentoring programs. And you may be wondering, what in the Sam hell is cultural humility? Well, they define it as a lifelong process of self-reflection and self-critique wherein one commits to learn about other cultures and to demonstrate indifference to their own. So this particular professor studies how teachers employ that and also social justice. A kinesiology professor whose research focus is, quote, issues of diversity, inclusion, social justice, and public policy in leisure and recreation. Social justice PE, y'all. Go Big Green. Veronica Jones Baldwin explores topics such as male students of color, student engagement and activism, and rhetoric around equity and diversity issues. And she utilizes frameworks such as critical discourse analysis and critical race theory. So, student engagement and activism, check. Critical discourses, check. Critical race theory, got it. Her scholarship focuses on herself as a mathematics teacher educator, mathematics teacher educators, pre-service teachers, and practicing teachers that incorporates the rehumanizing of mathematics and equitable pathways in STEM education. So more of that loon bag self-reflection crap. And then humanizing math is interesting and also stupid because it just means teaching math more subjectively, like the humanities. Humanizing humanities, see? In other words, not having narrowly defined answers in math. I'm not joking. In their world, some students' lived experience and culture may mean that 2 plus 2 does not equal 4. And as a teacher, you have to honor these other ways of knowing that come from lived experience and identity. Really. This guy hosts the Vision of Education podcast that focuses on social studies, social media, and social justice. So there's that. Her mission is to cultivate critically conscious educators who rewrite the narrative on how minoritized languages can be a language of power in the language arts classroom, as well as unveil how institutions of schooling often operate to reinforce historical linguistic oppression among students of color. So she's just openly saying that she teaches teachers critical pedagogy, and also to bring non-standard English into their classrooms and treat non-standard English as a language of power to avoid oppressing students of color, because it would be racist and oppressive to teach a black student standard English if that's not what he hears at home. Her research focuses on social justice and mathematics education, with particular attention given to mathematics teacher educators, development of knowledge needed to teach mathematics for social justice. Social frickin' justice math, people. Really. Janelle Mathis. Her research interest, often focused on response to literature and critical content analysis of words and images, are also found in the areas of transactional theory of reader response, sociocultural context for literacy teaching and learning, critical literacy, and literacy through the arts. So, just a straight up critical literacy professor. Oh, and now we have an endowed chair in Dr. Michelle Perez. She uses women of color feminisms, yes, plural, you heard me right, women of color feminisms to inform her community collaborations, research, and pedagogy. These perspectives not only critically orient her work, but they also foreground the urgency to re-envision the field to support culturally sustaining praxis and programs for minoritized young children. Again, a buttload of words to say she teaches critical pedagogy and relies on the writings of the Black feminist movement. Brenda Rubio's research focuses on the development of critically conscious education leadership. She examines learning spaces that promote the curricular recognition of alternative epistemologies and the development of pedagogies that foster students' culture, language, and funds of knowledge. So Miss Brenda wants to train critically conscious school administrators, not just teachers. And what are alternative epistemologies? That's another fancy way of saying that 2 plus 2 may not equal 4 in the culture of some students, and that we have to honor that. This is culturally responsive teaching, a hallmark of critical pedagogy. Can you see how students being told by their teachers that 2 plus 2 needn't equal 4 might assist in tearing down the existing society? I damn sure hope so. Matthew Lemberger Truelove, who teaches future school counselors. His theoretical writings cover a number of areas such as the development of a unique school counseling theory, social justice philosophy, research design, and humanistic counseling. So, critical school guidance counseling. Add it to critical literacy, critical PE, critical math, critical science, critical art, critical social studies, and critical school administration. Fantastic. The future looks so bright, y'all. These are just some choice cuts, folks. If you drill down into the recent publications of any of the faculty at most universities in Texas and everywhere else, you'll find critical pedagogy gold. These are the factories that create wokeness. This is your vocabulary list taken from their bios. These are the words that you look for when you're looking at professors, when you're looking at teachers, when you're looking at teacher colleges or public schools. All right, culturally sustaining, culturally responsive, identity, critical anything, critical everything, humanizing, equity-focused, justice-focused, social justice, agency, cultural knowledge, lived experience, power or systems of power, oppression or systems of oppression, counter-narratives, democratic classrooms, transformative, and The word text, because they don't just use books to teach critical literacy. They use ads, social media posts, cable news stories, photographs, but they call all of it text. Imagine how kids who are told that there's no narrowly defined answers in math are going to interpret the rest of the world. What is the net result to a society where kids don't learn the nuts and bolts of Texas history because their teachers invite them instead to critique not only the textbook, but Texas itself and the world? We've had a pretty good thing going living in a democratic republic, and Texas has long been the best expression of what can be achieved in such a society. If we continue allowing our state teacher colleges and public schools to be led and staffed by these people, all of that inevitably dissolves. What we're left with is uneducated generations that relentlessly whine about society but lack the basic skills to find a place in it or to build a new one. Do not let this happen to Texas. Join Texas History Trust in driving this madness from our schools.